Hi, it's me. Today we are exploring America's most haunted places. These stories come from real people who experience terrifying things in some of America's scariest locations. Some of these stories have been passed down through generations, while others were shared just recently. Each one is guaranteed to give you the chills, so let's get started. Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. While touring Eastern State Penitentiary, I felt an overwhelming sense of sadness and pain wash over me. It was as if the spirits of the inmates were reaching out to me, desperate to share their anguish. As I continued my exploration, I began experiencing strange phenomena. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and I could feel unseen eyes watching me from the shadows. Then suddenly, without any warning, an ice-cold hand gripped my shoulder, sending shivers down my spine. Terrified, I whirled around, but there was no one there. Yet I could still feel the icy touch on my skin. As I hurried away, I heard the sound of dragging metal moans echoing behind me, growing louder with each step I took. I didn't dare look back. Instead, I fled, desperate to escape the haunting presence that seemed to be following me. But as I ran, I knew I wasn't alone. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, Louisville, Kentucky. During a tour of Waverly Hills Sanatorium, our guide shared a chilling story about the ghost of a young girl named Ruth. Ruth had tuberculosis, and her mother would sneak her into the sanatorium at night to receive treatment. However, she was eventually caught and quarantined, leading to her death. Our guide told us that Ruth's spirit is said to roam the halls of the sanatorium, searching for her mother. Suddenly, we heard the sound of footsteps approaching us. We turned around, but there was no one there. Then we felt a cold breeze and the distinct smell of baby powder, even though there were no children present. As we continued the tour, we noticed that the temperature dropped dramatically in the room where Ruth had stayed. And then we saw her, the little girl's ghost. She appeared in the corner of the room, staring directly at us. Some even witnessed her moving from room to room, as if searching for her mother. Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I was visiting Gettysburg with my family when I decided to explore the town's cemetery on my own. As I walked among the rows of headstones, a strong sense of sadness and despair washed over me. The further I ventured, the more intense the feeling became, until suddenly I couldn't take it anymore and broke down in tears. My family found me, and we left the cemetery together. But once outside the gates, I turned back to see a woman in a long white dress walking toward me. She had a sad expression on her face and seemed to be crying. When she reached me, she passed right through me and vanished. I was left shaking and terrified, wondering if I had just seen a ghost. Later, I discovered that the cemetery I had visited was known to be haunted by the spirits of soldiers who died in the Battle of Gettysburg. Could I have encountered one of them? Salem, Massachusetts? As I strolled through Salem, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I decided to visit the old Burying Point Cemetery, where many accused witches from the Salem witch trials are buried. As I walked among the graves, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread and fear. Suddenly, I heard a voice whispering my name. I turned around, but no one was there. The voice whispered again, and this time, I made out the words "run away." Startled, I looked around frantically for the source of the voice, but I couldn't see anyone. Feeling increasingly uneasy, I decided to leave the cemetery. However, as I turned to go, I saw a shadowy figure standing at the entrance. It seemed to be beckoning me to follow it. I hesitated for a moment, torn between my desire to escape and my morbid curiosity. But ultimately, I chose to flee. As I ran away, I could hear the whispers getting louder and more urgent, urging me to run faster. I never looked back, but I couldn't help but wonder if I had escaped the clutches of the vengeful witches of Salem. Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, Weston, West Virginia. My friend and I were exploring the abandoned Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum when we began experiencing strange and terrifying phenomena. First, we heard the sound of screaming and banging coming from one of the rooms. Then we felt a cold spot and the distinct smell of decay. As we cautiously entered the room, we saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner. It seemed to be watching us intently, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and foreboding. Suddenly, the temperature dropped dramatically, and we both felt a cold breeze on our necks. Terrified, we backed away slowly, keeping our eyes on the figure. It remained motionless, its eyes fixed on us. Finally, we made it to the door, and as we opened it, the figure vanished. Shaking and breathless, we fled the asylum, knowing that we had just witnessed something truly terrifying. St. Augustine, Florida. One night while staying in St. Augustine, I decided to take a ghost tour. Our guide led us through the city's historic district, sharing tales of the area's most haunted locations. We stopped at a house that was rumored to be haunted by the ghost of a woman who had died there in the 1800s. As I stood on the porch, I could feel the presence of the ghost all around me. I could sense her sadness and despair, and it was almost as if she were reaching out to me, trying to communicate. Suddenly, I heard the sound of footsteps on the stairs behind me. I turned around, but no one was there. Then I felt a cold breeze on my neck, and the hair on the back of my neck stood on end. I knew that I was not alone. As I continued on the tour, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every shadow seemed to hold a secret, and every corner could turn into a ghostly apparition. New Orleans, Louisiana. I was exploring the French Quarter in New Orleans when I came across a voodoo shop. Intrigued, I entered the store and began browsing the items for sale. I picked up a small doll, and as I did, I felt a sudden chill run down my spine. Suddenly, the air grew heavy and oppressive, and I could feel the spirits of the voodoo priestesses watching me intently. Startled, I placed the doll back down and quickly left the store. As I walked away, I heard the sound of chanting and drums growing louder and more intense. I turned around, but no one was there. I tried to shake off the experience, but the chanting followed me, and I soon realized that I was being stalked by the ghosts of the voodoo priestesses. I ran to a nearby bar and hid, but the chanting continued. I was trapped in a nightmare from which I couldn't wake up. The Stanley Hotel, Estes Park, Colorado. One night while staying at the Stanley Hotel, I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I assumed it was my husband, but when I called out to him, he replied that he was fast asleep. I listened intently and heard the footsteps again, this time closer to our room. Suddenly, the doorknob began to turn, and the door slowly opened. I screamed and buried my head under the covers until my husband woke up and turned on the lights. But when we investigated, we found nothing. The room was empty, and the only sound was the wind howling outside. We never heard the footsteps again, but the next morning, we discovered that the door had been pushed open during the night. Waco Mammoth National Monument, Waco, Texas. While exploring the Waco Mammoth National Monument, I stumbled upon a skeleton of a woolly mammoth. Suddenly the ground began to shake, and the hair on my arms stood on end. I felt a sense of dread and fear wash over me, and I could have sworn I heard the sound of trumpets in the distance. Terrified, I ran to my car and slammed the door shut. Shaking and breathless, I drove away from the monument, never looking back. These stories are truly terrifying, and they give me goosebumps just thinking about them. Do you believe in ghosts? Have you ever seen one? Share your experiences in the comments below. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss out on any of our videos. Thanks for watching.